Okay, if you watched my video from yesterday, you know I'm comparing guns to their automotive equivalents. If you haven't seen that first video, click the eye up in the corner here. You can find that video, but I don't want to have to go through the same intro I went through yesterday because this video is already really long. So let's just sum it up. Let's just say crying while masturbating, cat vomit, sexy internet grandmas, and here's some guns and their automotive comparisons. Let's start today with one of my favorite guns ever, the Beretta 90 series guns, specifically the 92 series guns. Now, the Beretta 92s are one of the most proven guns on the planet, one of the most battle-proven guns on the planet, but they are still stylish. It's a 9mm, so it's not the most powerful gun in the world, but it's still very capable. Berettas are a perfect example of that Italian engineering where they don't believe you have to sacrifice style for performance. You can have the best of both worlds. And like anything else, when something is stylish, there's people that love it and people that hate it. But people that love it really appreciate the beauty of it and the function of it. And all of these things combined is why the Beretta 92 series is the Maserati A6 series line of the handgun world. The Maserati A6 series cars are some of the most stylish, beautiful, and well-made cars ever to hit the road. They are the perfect example of that Italian automotive engineering where something can be both a performance vehicle and one of the most beautiful things on the road. To this day, the A6 G2000 is one of my favorite cars I've ever seen drive down a highway, and the Beretta 92 is still one of my favorite guns I've ever shot. And like the Beretta, the Maserati A6s aren't the most powerful cars in the world. They don't have giant engines, but boy, are they functional and boy, are they beautiful. And they are just the perfect melding of style and function. And that is why the Beretta 92 series guns are the Maserati A6 series of the handgun world. Now let's go from a gun I love to a gun I can't stand, and that is the kel-tec. And I'm just going to say every kel-tec because they all seem pretty much the same to me. They are garbage. I know people say, oh, if you just fix this and fix that and fix this and fix that, you have a pretty good gun for the price. No, you don't. You still just have a piece of garbage that might work for a while. In fact, it'll work right up to the point that it doesn't work any longer. And that point is usually not very far down the line. They are just a total piece of crap that's held together by glue and screws. And that is why the kel-tec series guns are the Chevy Vega of the handgun world. Let's face it, I owned one. Chevy Vegas are garbage. If you're lucky enough to get one that runs, it's only going to run for a little while, and that is usually until you actually have to use it in any substantial way. The first time the car overheats, and let's face it, they almost always overheat if you do something stupid like drive up a hill or go over 50 miles an hour, the aluminum heads on the engine are going to warp and the car is going to be worthless. If you want to keep using it from that point on, you're going to have to buy a mule and a rope. So they are one of the worst cars I've ever seen. Now, I know a lot of people out there say, yeah, but if you do this to the Vega and that to the Vega and this to the Vega, you'll have one of the best race cars out there. And I say, yeah, if you change the engine, the transmission, the suspension, the wheels, etc., you might have a decent race car. But what you don't have is a Vega. It's no longer a Vega. It's the same thing with kel-tecs. And that's why kel-tecs are the Chevy Vega of the handgun world. Now let's talk about the Browning HiPower, one of the most classic guns of all time. The only guns that might be more iconic than the HiPower are the 1911 and the single action Army. And the difference between those guns and the HiPower is the HiPower still stands up today when it comes to being a duty weapon or a carry weapon. Even though it's old and even though it's got some outdated features, it's still one of the best performing guns on the market, and everyone should have one if they are a lover of firearms. The Browning HiPower pretty much defined what this type of gun should be, and that's why the Browning HiPower is the Ford Mustang of the handgun world. The Ford Mustang pretty much defined the muscle car industry. It pretty much brought it to the forefront of American culture. It is one of the most important cars in American automotive history. It's a car that's still being made today, although with some major changes, but the classic ones are still the ones everyone wants to have. They might be a little bit outdated, what with their solid rear axles and other features, but still, they are a classic. And they will still get down a straight piece of road with as much fun and as much power as any other car in their class ever made. They're a true classic that any car lover would love to have, and that's why the Browning HiPower is the Ford Mustang of the handgun world. Now let's talk about the Springfield Armory XD series pistols. Now, these are pretty good pistols, and people do love them. The people that own them really like them, and they have a reason to like them. But a lot of people buy them simply because of that little logo on there, the Springfield Armory logo, even though that logo probably shouldn't even be there. Let's face it, these aren't true Springfield Armory products. They're just made by a company that imports a gun from overseas and bought that logo and slaps it on them. So even though they're a good gun, they're still a little bit of a fraud, in my opinion. And they are a little bit clunky, and they're not the most stylish thing in the world, but they're still kind of attractive in their own way. And that's why the Springfield Armory XD series is the classic Pontiac Trans Am Firebird of the handgun world. The Pontiac Firebird Trans Am was a pretty good car. It was a decent car, but it was really made popular by movies, Burt Reynolds, etc. It definitely wasn't the best car on the road. It definitely wasn't the best handling car, the best performing car. There was really nothing about it that was the best, but it was a good overall car. And let's face it, a lot of people bought it because of the logos, because of that big Firebird, and because of that Trans Am label. And let's face it, it didn't deserve that Trans Am label because it never actually competed in that circuit. It didn't even qualify for that circuit. So that was a little bit of a misnomer. So a lot of people bought the car based on a logo that was there that didn't deserve to be there. But overall, it was still a pretty good car, and I understand why people liked it. And it does have a historical quality to it. Same thing with the XD pistols. They're good enough that I understand why people like them. And they do have that logo on there that is kind of historical. So that's why the XD series from Springfield Armory is the Pontiac Trans Am Firebird of the handgun world. Now let's move on to Glock. A lot of people have been wanting to hear what I say about Glocks, and a lot of people think I'm going to say they're the Honda Civic of the handgun world, and I have made that comparison in the past. But then I thought to myself, Civics have too much style nowadays to be a Glock, so the Glock can't be a Honda. And then when I started thinking about it, the Glock is a bare bones gun. It's capable, it's functional, it's durable, but it's nothing fancy. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, they're such a perfect gun, they never break down. Well, yeah, they do break down. They break down just as much as any other gun. It's just that they're so cheap and easy to fix that most people even forget they ever broke. And the parts that come on the gun from the factory are often subpar. That's why there's a whole industry devoted around providing you new parts for the gun. In fact, some people love to put so much time and money and new parts into these guns that they try to create something new altogether. But when you look at it, you still say, it's got a lot of extras on it, but it's still a Glock. The Glock is basically the people's gun. And that's why the Glock is the Volkswagen Type 1, or better known as the Volkswagen Bug, of the handgun world. The Bug is a no-frills car that will get the job done. It will get you down the road. It'll even get you up an icy hill if you let a little air out of the tires. It is a car that is really reliable and really simple. It is the people's car. And they're durable. They're still around today. You still see them driving the highways, and they were made in the 60s. And there are a little group of fanatics of this car that think it's the best car ever made, and they act like it's the most durable and most reliable car you could ever own. But that's not true. They do break down. They're just so easy to fix that if you have a pair of needle nose pliers and some duct tape, you can get pretty much anywhere in them, even if they do break down. And the Volkswagen Beetle was revolutionary. It created a new market for cars. It created a car that everyone could have and everyone could use, much like the Glock did for the handgun world. The Glock was the gun that anyone could have, anyone can use. It is a simple gun, doesn't take a lot of training to be able to point it and pull the trigger. And that was the same thing that the Volkswagen Beetle was. It was made for the people. And much like the Glock, there's an entire industry devoted to buying spare parts and add-on parts for the Volkswagen Bug. People love to make them into all kinds of things from drag cars to Baja vehicles. But when you look at one, no matter what they've done to it, you still say, oh, that started off as a Bug, which in its basic form is just a simple, obtainable, no-frills vehicle. And even though it's no frills, it is still time-proven, time-tested, durable, and reliable. And that is why the Glock is the Volkswagen Type 1 Bug of the handgun world. Now let's talk about the Walther PPQ. If you talk about the Glock, you have to talk about the Walther PPQ. The Walther PPQ is basically what the Glock should have been if it kept evolving with the times, which it didn't. The Glock is pretty much the same gun it always was, with just a few little cosmetic differences. In my opinion, the PPQ is the modern day Glock, the Glock that has kept up with the times and kept up with technology. And because of this, the Walther PPQ is the new modern Volkswagen Beetle of the handgun world. The Volkswagen Beetles are very solid little cars. They're good little cars. They're not the best car in the world, but they're a good choice if you want a simple, reliable, well-performing vehicle, much like the Walther PPQ. It's not the best gun in the world, but it's awesome. And the Volkswagen Beetle is what the Volkswagen Type 1 would have eventually evolved into being if it had been allowed to keep up with the times, which it didn't. They just quit making them in the 1980s. They were relatively unchanged from when they first came around, just a few minor differences, and then they just stopped making them. And then someone finally said, hey, those old ones are very popular. Let's make a new one. But let's make a new one that is kept up with modern technology and is the Volkswagen of the present time. And that's why the Walther PPQ is the Volkswagen Beetle of the handgun world. Now today I'm going to finish with one of my favorite guns, and that is the Chiappa Rhino. I think everyone's aware that I love this gun, and I admit it is a funky looking gun. It is a gun that the looks alone might turn some people off. But when you experience the gun, you know it is an amazing pistol that has some features that make it unique in the firearms industry and make it well worth every penny you spend on it. When people see you carrying one, they might say, why in the world is someone carrying that weird looking gun? And if they've never experienced one for themselves, they won't understand why you're carrying it. But if they have experienced it, they know why you have it. And that's why the Chiappa Rhino is the Pontiac Aztec of the handgun world. Now, I know I've made a joke in the past that the Kimber K6S might be the Pontiac Aztec of the revolver world, but really, it's the Chiappa Rhino. Because the Aztec looked funky. People looked at it and went, what were people thinking? But if you're someone that liked camping, you like the outdoors, you like the car that's a little bit different, you really understood why the Aztec was what it was. It had some features that no other car on the market had. It was just a unique car, both in function and in appearance. If you saw someone driving down the road in one and you've never experienced one before, you'd be like, what were they thinking? But if you understand what the Aztec is about, you're like, that is one of the best choices you could possibly make. And that is why the Chiappa Rhino is the Pontiac Aztec of the handgun world. So there you have it. There's some guns on the market that I think are noteworthy for one reason or another, and their automotive equivalents.